Welcome to the Leadership in Law podcast with host Marilyn Jenkins. Cut through the noise, get actionable insights and inspiring stories delivered straight to your ears. Your ultimate podcast for navigating the ever-changing world of law firm ownership. In each episode, we dive deep into the critical topics that matter most to you, from unlocking explosive growth to building a thriving team. We connect you with successful firm leaders and industry experts who share their proven strategies and hard-won wisdom. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey as a law firm owner, the Leadership in Law podcast is here to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to build a successful and fulfilling legal practice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Law podcast. I'm your host, Marilyn Jenkins. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Hillary Johns, to the show today. Hillary is a civil trial lawyer who has tried more than 100 cases to verdict. She is the managing partner for Hillary Johns Trial Lawyer, which maintains offices in Beverly Hills, the Bay Area, and New York City. She practices in the areas of civil litigation, business law, torts, defamation and media law, intellectual property, employment law, and entertainment law. Hillary works with the American Bar Association to provide legal services to military personnel. She's a member of the Legal Network for Gender Equality through the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, and also served as pro bono attorney and volunteer for local, statewide, and national domestic violence organizations. Outside of her legal career, she's a competitive ranked soccer player and professional athlete. She's a licensed competitive youth soccer coach. That is so exciting. I'm excited to have you here, Hillary. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Marilyn. I appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely. I love all the work you're doing, especially with domestic violence organizations and the military. Those are two things that are very close to my heart. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started.
How I got started is I was finishing up my pro sports career and are going towards that. And I really wanted to be a trial lawyer. And I tried to figure out would being a lawyer be boring? Would this be something that I could do all day and make a good living at it? And I'd seen LA Law and I'd seen Perry Mason. And it sounded very fun. And I looked at it and I know a lot of lawyers and I'm related to some lawyers or close to some. So I looked at it and I really wanted to be a trial lawyer. And that's what I wanted to do. And then as I got into it, I learned that most lawyers really don't want to be trial lawyers. They don't mind litigating and they don't mind that, but they don't want to be the ones that get up in front of the jury and argue the case, put the case together and are in the lead and, they have to take their licks in court and things like that. And I developed that and I had a good winning percentage and I liked it. And it was the part I found I really enjoyed about it. And I found it's been very beneficial to clients in a lot of ways. One, to be able to take a case to trial. And two, I think also for negotiations, and to assist clients because you can honestly say, I've been there, I've done this, believe this is how this goes. And I do think when you're representing a client, you have an attorney there, it's like, this is one that goes to trial. They're going to take you a lot more seriously. They take your clients a lot more seriously. And I think that's been really nice. And I think trial by jury or having a trial is so fundamental to our legal system, regardless of your politics, regardless of what you believe. It's really one of the main things that separates us from any other country, from any other legal system, that we have this process in place where, a lot of countries or a lot of things you hear, I don't know them too well, but you hear these things, well, this is how it goes and you're very limited and, maybe you have rights, maybe you don't. But I think that's what was so fundamental to us in the U.S. And I think I'm very proud to be a part of that. And I think we have the best legal system. I really do think we have the best legal system in the world. So I'm very fortunate.
I agree. And it was interesting. My next question was, how'd you niche down? It sounds like you chose what you wanted to do from the beginning. And that's pretty interesting. Where some people, they try different things. They go in a firm and they end up doing different things and then find the one thing they really like. So it's interesting. You picked it right away and you're obviously very good at it if you've done over 100 cases and you enjoy it.
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of lawyers, you could pick different areas. That was another decision I made early on, was I didn't want to focus on just one practice area. It's the days of the general practitioner are sort of back in a lot of ways because people are tired of saying, I have to get 6 attorneys. I need a real estate attorney. I need an insurance attorney. I need an intellectual property
Right.
attorney, and it's costing them an arm and a leg. But I do know a lot of the attorneys I know, particularly the older attorneys, which now, but when I was younger, didn't just focus on 1 or 2 areas because you don't, oh, we don't do that, or we don't do that. And certainly if you don't have that skill set, you need to tell them, like, I don't do trust in estate planning. That's not my
Right.
area. I have to tell them I'm not a tax lawyer. We advise them. But a lot of these areas, there's a lot of crossover in a lot of them. For example, entertainment law is a lot of it is, profit sharing, business law, intellectual property, and employment law. That's a lot of what that is. And being aware of, what the other rules are in terms of profit sharing, royalties, and what those are and how those are going to look. But there's really 3 areas. So a lot of those areas are actually very similar. And so there's not really any reason you can't provide it. So that was another, it took a lot longer to do because you can't just pick up a book and read, right? You can't just
Right.
a couple cases. It takes years and years and years to know how to do that and do a good job and feel comfortable in it and feel like, oh, that's not a question I know. That's the nicer thing about getting older as a lawyer is you can think about this thing and go, okay, I know this. I've done these before. Whereas when you're a new lawyer, you kind of have to act like you know what you're doing, or you have to sort of go, oh dear, and you can't tell the client I don't know, and then you have to tell your employer, and things like that too, or look it up, or let me research it, and clients don't always like to hear that, and that's something I did learn too is lawyers don't know everything. No one knows everything. Some things you
Right.
have to look into that, and there's a tactful way to say that to a client. It's like, yes, I do know how to do this, but let me check into this area because I don't know all the answers off the top of my head. And I can't give you an automatic answer, and I can't do those sort of things right now. But this is what I can do to help you. But I think a lot of people hear that in HR and corporate settings. I'll get you the answer. I'll look at the data and give you the answer. So you have to sort of differentiate it in a way that makes the client feel comfortable. And
Yeah, now that makes sense because I know in so many instances you're just told to say yes and we'll figure it out. But when you're advising a client, that's a completely different thing.
yeah, it is. And they need to know what you know and what you don't know. And, it's okay to say, that's a new area I don't know. And, it often is in many areas like AI, cybersecurity, and a lot of intellectual property, employment law. These are evolving areas. And you have to tell them, look, this is an evolving area. This is an area that really hasn't been tested at the appellate level. So we don't know. I mean, this is how in practice people are doing it, but I want to be clear to you, this could change. This employment law, for example, in the states, particularly in the state of California, but also in New York and other states, saying this is the law right now. I can't tell you that a case isn't in an intellectual property zone. I can't tell you a case isn't going to come out, or a governor might not come out and make some rules. Usually at the beginning of your employment law, it's usually in January 1st and July 1st. Those are when they roll out all these new rules, and they roll out all these Senate bills and things like that. That's usually when they go into effect. So, we always tell them we have a little primer. We notify clients about the changes and what they can expect and how best to adapt to those.
So you prepare them before it comes out. Do you find it's difficult being licensed into multiple states and having to keep track of multiple states' employment laws or that sort of thing?
We have a lot of help and a great staff. I mean, getting everything put in place is the more difficult one. For example, New York and California are actually pretty similar, and those are the main states that we practice in. For example, Montana is a bit different. It is, but we have systems in place for those, and we sort of know what the differences are. For example, you can't in state of California, you can't record a person in most situations without their consent, whereas it's one party consent in New York. So, we have those different ones. So we have rules within firm, and we do advise them. Sometimes we usually adhere to the higher standard, and we tell them, look, if you go to another attorney, you might get a different advice. We can't do that here because we're licensed in several different states and things like that. And we're very clear to clients what we can and can't do. California and New York have a lot of similarities. I mean, a lot.
Okay.
So that does make it, those are our 2 primary areas. So it does make it a lot similar. There are some differences, and we just have to know them. And we have attorneys in both states and staff in both states who are like our staff in New York are longtime residents there. So they're certainly familiar with the environment and things like that. And
All right.
there are also cultural differences with like something that's considered funny in LA, like a joke or something like that. You notice, or if it's a Hollywood joke, something like people in New York would be looking at you, whereas a political joke in New York, in Manhattan, would be like, oh, well, be more funny, those sort of things. So you have to know those be sensitive to that.
Right, right. So then, okay, let's talk a little bit about new developments in the law. I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, obviously the employment law we talked about, but what are you experiencing right now?
Well, we're seeing a lot of the AI and cybersecurity and data security is getting big. Those are huge areas that we're advising our clients what they need to do to protect themselves, make sure they're safe, what they can do with insurance, what they can't do with insurance, what they're going to be able to do, and getting out reliable information. Part of it depends on their industry. Also, what we're seeing, AI is really untested, but you're already starting to see the lawsuits. You're already starting to see how fast it's changed and whether or not that's a good idea for a particular business. It's one thing to enhance your photo. It's quite another to use it for information.
Yeah.
And do you really want them to do? And I've noticed just in everyday life how reliant we are on computers now, and people just assume if a computer says something, it's true, whereas as we all know, it's not. And it
Exactly.
could be based on human error. It could be based on, you know, whatever coding went in or what, the computers can only read what you give them and what's
Mhm.
available. And if they're getting the wrong information or they're putting it together incorrectly, you're not going to get the right answer. It's that simple. It's
Yeah, I
a,
mean, and it's like in any industry when you get the output, you have to double check it.
yeah.
You know, even Amazon now is when you publish a paperback book, one of the questions is, did AI write this, and was it extensively edited? There's a whole series of questions now because so many people are doing and just taking AI off the bat and just using it. It's dangerous to do that.
Yeah, we are. We don't do it at all. And I know there are some people like use AI. Okay, do I ever get autocorrect and go, oh, okay, yeah, sure, but we're checking that, and I have someone checking my work here, either an attorney or staff, or grammatically and things like that. I think in the area of law that's not advisable. I quite certain people are doing it. They had that
Yeah.
case in New York a couple years ago with that poor guy. Not poor guy, but he used an AI thing, and they weren't even real cases. I guarantee you that comes up. You already have issues with lawyers taking cites of cases and not even reading them. That's gone on for years. So they're citing
Yeah. There's
cases.
always shortcuts, right? But when you get a shortcut that's made up, that's completely different.
Yeah, exactly. I just think there's too much risk involved in doing something like that. I think that the only person literally the only person you're hurting is yourself and the firm
Mhm.
and the client. And
What do you feel about AI and like these lawsuits? Would our professional liability insurance like cover that, or is it just
well,
stupidity? Now you
and
gotta.
that's another question. And again, we're actually doing a presentation with the Beverly Hills Bar Association, I believe, and we may do one in New York as well, with some very talented speakers that are talking about that very thing with court reporting and making the record and how that works. And one of the ethical and practical tips we're saying is you better check with your insurance carrier and make sure that you're even covered on that, because that may be an exception, because a lot of these policies haven't really changed over the years. I mean, we've had the same carrier for years, so I can guarantee, I doubt they've adapted to, or they're just not going to tell you, and it's going to be somewhere in there, and you're going to have to look for it, and they may call it something different than AI. So one, can you ethically do it? Do you have to tell a client? I think you do. If you're using AI in your research, or you're using AI to record something, or you're using AI for any reason, I think you need to tell them either in your retainer, or you need to get them to sign an acknowledgement saying, we're going to be using this and you understand and agree to it. And not just that, but I think you have to tell them there are some risks, what those risks are. They say, yeah, they said they were using, because I could just see it with a lawyer. They say, yeah, they told me they were using it, but they're lawyers. I figured they knew what they were doing. I mean, because
Yeah, I mean
that's
that's
what
an assumption.
that's what's going to happen. So you need to tell them this is what could happen. I think you need to go a few steps further with them. A lot of these things like case texts and things like that, there are only a few reliable sources of even cases now that you can read.
Mhm.
So if you're online reading a case, in your case, I know case text is one that says generated by AI. I don't think Westlaw does, and I'd have to check on that. But they have these, and then you read them, and you go, "Oh, this is not this is." I can't guarantee this is really what the court said.
Yeah, I mean, if they built a bot that used the actual text of those books, then it could reference that. But then you've got to consistently update it with the new precedent, any new updates that's come through. So it is
Or did the bot
accurate.
get it? Did the bot get it right? No,
Yeah.
they do. So if you go to, as they say, go to these, they used to call it going to the books. You know, when
Mhm.
I started law practicing in the early '90s, and you had Westlaw, and that was a lot more efficient. But people still went to the library and did all those things and looked up.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the legal Dewey Decimal System, and you went, you looked up things, and it took hours and hours and hours to look up 5 cases where it takes 20 minutes now. That
Yeah.
you can you assume if it's generated by AI, it's right? What if you have a powerful quote or a precedent that's said and it's wrong? I mean,
True.
there are ethical consequences if you miscite a case knowingly. It certainly looks bad. You
Yeah.
know, yeah. How many times have you? All lawyers who've litigated have seen counsel. I don't think that has anything to do with the site, or have had the embarrassing moment where your associate, or you don't check your associate's work, or whatever it is, and they get the site wrong, and you're in court sitting going, "Okay, that's wrong," and opposing counsel is very happy to hear that. So it's those, but having AI adds another layer to that. So is the source of the information that you're getting, just because someone said this is a case doesn't mean it is.
Right.
It really
Right.
doesn't. And have you read it? So not only have you read it, but have you read it from a reliable source? I don't know that you can. I had to look up a case the other day for a brief, and I typed in case 6. I'm like, I got to go to take that extra few minutes. I was really I really did not have a lot of spare time. And we weren't on an absolute deadline, but I had so many other things to do. And I go, I better check on Westlaw and make sure that's what it says, because then I felt I had some more rely. Whereas case text, it says power generated by AI. A lot of these things are saying. I'm not saying I have nothing against case text. That's just a particular one that I used on that day. There are a lot of those, but do you know that the case is right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
very fundamental. We all learn this in law school. You got to get the case right. You got to say it right. You can't miscite it. There are certain rules about that. So it doesn't matter if you're in California, or if you're in Indiana, or if you're in Florida or Texas or Washington or Maine. You got to do it right.
You still got to get it right. And it's like your gut feeling made you double check that. And
Yeah.
that's,
Well, I
yeah.
saw the AI and I was like, yeah, I don't know. Well, it's for the Court of Appeals too. So it
Yeah.
doesn't want to get it right there. And so but I think you really have to be careful about the reason. And the clients need to know that you're using AI research. Are you using AI tools? And, maybe a client may say, look, I don't like this. I want you to do
Yeah.
it this way. And I don't feel comfortable. It's, and, they need to know with potential conflict that this is an untested area. We don't really know how that's going to work. There could be a problem later. And, you're already getting these lawsuits. I guarantee you, I'm not saying we won't use AI. I'm just saying there's going to be a lot of lawsuits about this. These are just starting. They
Yeah.
are starting. And
Well, especially with the as things keep changing and adapting, and yeah, exactly. And it gets more and more, now the different ones are actually scouring the web and can go to websites and that sort of thing. So
exactly.
yeah, yeah, the power is yet to be seen. And I think there are going to be more lawsuits coming out of it. And then, the fake AI images as well, using those for malicious intent. So there's a
AI
lot going on.
legislation is already coming out in certain states. I'm paying attention to that. We're paying attention to those to see what those mean and why they mean that, because we need to stay on top of it. And you have to balance, is it really worth using this at all?
Mhm.
It's because, lawyers don't like mistakes. Lawyers don't like to lose. They don't.
Right. I mean, you got to balance the okay, I'm going to save a lot of time, but then I've got to go double check the am I saving time if I have to double check what AI tells me, and and then I have to go double check that it was right. What it
Right.
saved you is having to find that. Now you can go look it up and see if it's correct. So,
You can look it up, but also, did they get everything? Because you didn't really do it yourself. You kind of had somebody else do it for you.
yeah,
So you don't
exactly.
really know if that's correct or not. And it can bring up a lot of issues. And is it accurate? Is the client okay with it? Are you covered by insurance for that?
Yeah.
If you started your research or whatever you did and you missed some key sites and you lost the hearing, and that's it for the client because you didn't want to get off your duff and go do this, and you didn't have time and you're so busy and all, we're all busy. Lawyers are
Yeah.
busy people. I mean, they are. It's just how it goes. So having all those things and saying, well, look, everybody else has to do it. What makes you so special that you get around this? The answer is you don't. And so that's the problem there. I think that you're seeing is, and then again, if you made a mistake and you missed something, are you even covered by malpractice insurance at
Yeah.
all? And I don't know that we are. I don't know unless you have something in writing from your insurance carrier what that means. Are you covered on your E&O? I don't know that you.
I think in my opinion, they may not specifically, like you said earlier. I don't think insurance companies are going to go and explicitly write it down. They have those miscellaneous paragraphs that cover anything that comes up. So it would be interesting to see if an error made would be covered by your insurance.
Yeah. Did you prepare
So
for that? Yeah. And they, I think they take into consideration trends and what people are using and research. But on the other hand, are you being a competent attorney and meeting the
Mhm.
standard of care if you're using AI when you could just as easily spend a couple of other extra hours, doing that too? That's kind of like delegating responsibilities. Someone saying, I don't have time to deal with this, go do it. And then not checking their work and saying, well, I think they know how to do it. I don't really know. There are those issues too. If I delegated something to someone who, well, we don't have them like that here, but didn't really know how to do something and didn't check their work and or had concerns about their performance and didn't check it, then am I really meeting the standard of care doing that? I don't know.
yeah, no, I think you answered the question yourself there. You know you're not if you just took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
So that I mean, a lot of interesting questions coming up with AI being so prevalent and growing as we're talking about. Let's jump to social media or media. So I know that you help clients. You don't do PR, but you help them and advise when it comes to social media and branding and that sort of thing. How do you help your clients with that? And what are the pitfalls that you're finding?
Well, one, we tell them a lot of people, particularly of a certain generation, live their lives online.
Yes.
So they live their lives online. They have to respond. I know some certain generations, they feel deprived if they can't. There's a real mental aspect and emotional aspect to it. And I have to tell them, anything you put online, do you really want this later? Or not the retaliation, but the responding, to an
Right.
allegation because we get a lot of these. Such and such said this online. I want this person punished. I want it. Going back to AI, it's not as easy as it used to be to take something down on TikTok or
Oh
Facebook.
no, once it's there, it's on the internet. It's going to be hit somewhere.
Yeah, it is. And it's, well, they now have AI, so the
Yeah.
AI are screening these things, and a lot of these companies are using AI to screen all these complaints and to do these things. So, they have companies that will take them down. They can have had a lot of success doing that. A lot of them are going to that. We also advise them, look, discretion is the better part of valor. I know you feel you have to answer right now. So you have a couple generations really, that they live their lives online because that's how they do things. And then you have other
Yeah.
generations that don't trust it at all and never use it and have to do something. And then you have my generation, which was sort of in the middle of that. Some use it, some don't, but certainly not as aggressively as others do. And so you're sitting there going, okay, what am I going to do here and how am I going to do this? And you have to advise them, use it sparingly,
Mhm.
if at all. If you want to have one statement, that's fine. What is that statement? And is this really a good idea? I generally advise against it if there's an allegation or a lawsuit, or they may come out with one statement, to say, you're denying the allegations like a press release and you release it. We've had clients like that, but they want so badly to respond. And I have to tell them, I really don't advise it, particularly if there's litigation going on, because technically
Right.
being online is trying your case in the media.
Yeah.
It is considered a form of media, and they don't always understand that. Some people won't stop. Talked to attorneys, they have clients who will not stop posting and they will not stop doing this. And I'm like, okay, you can't take it down now. Do you understand? You have to keep it
Yeah.
up because there are attorneys and clients who've gotten sanctioned because it's a destruction of evidence. So you cannot take,
Oh, when you take it down.
yeah,
Yeah.
they've had attorneys get hit. I don't remember which state it was, Virginia or Texas. So they got a good verdict for a plaintiff, but it got reduced by like $800,000 because the plaintiff had deleted evidence and taken it down off social media at the instruction of the attorney. So
Oh
both of
no.
them got hit. So the
Oh,
attorney
wow.
lost out on part of their fee, and the plaintiff, who would have gotten a lot of money, got a lot of it taken out from sanctions for doing
Mm,
it. A lot of them too. The court was not happy. If you take posts down during litigation,
mhm.
you are just, or you're going to go to litigation, there's going to be a legal speed. You're destroying evidence. If you get an agreement with opposing counsel, it's fine. But you have the problem there. You're sort of flagging. I think this is a problem. You know,
Wow.
and take
Okay.
it. So there are legal effects to taking these down now. We all know, the classic is they're shredding, they're staying up late, they're shredding documents, or they put it
Right.
in the fireplace, they're burning it. And that never happened, kind of thing. This is another version of that. And I really don't think people are like, oh, it's okay, I took it down now. But what about the reposts or people that are related to, all those kinds of things? It either has to stay up or it has to get taken down. You can make it private. You
Hmm.
can change the
Some.
setting. You can change the settings and things like that too, or you can hide the post. Yeah, but it has to be there. Yeah, it has to be
Yeah.
discoverable. So, like, if someone's going on, I also advise people. A lot of this stuff. It is amazing to me that people are still getting into the fake friends or following people or doing all these things. You can't do that. There are clear rules about lawyers cannot do that. You are also responsible for your private investigator and your staff. So excuse me, and
Yes.
your client if they do anything like that. So you really need to tell them, I do not want you doing this. It is amazing to me, even lawyers, smart people you would think would know. You don't, I mean, it seems to me common sense when you're doing due diligence online to the extent you are legally allowed to, and there are rules about that, that they like, oh, let's just fake friend this person or follow. I'm like, no, we're not going to create a fake account and do these kinds of things. Don't do it. Don't have your friend follow them. If you know someone who's already friends with them, you can ask them.
Yeah.
That's appropriate to do. But you can't go around, doing these things. And you need to be clear about that. So I mean, some of it really is common sense. You may not think taking down a post is destroying evidence, but it is. You can't
Mm-mm.
say you're someone else and not to try to get into someone's account and see what they're doing. You shouldn't be having contact with them anyway. That is also an ex parte communication. So if you're wondering if you can do it, you have to think about these things and you have to think of it. If you put a disguise on and went into some party and were looking around keeping track of someone, that's probably inappropriate. Things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to just look at it in a different context. And once you look at it in a different context, it's not as nebulous and hard to figure out. It's a net.
Right.
You don't have all the answers, but I always advise people this. And, if you're going to talk about a controversial subject, are you okay with that? Are you sure about this? Do you really want
Mhm.
to do this? Because, the immediacy of social media is very tempting to some people. How many
Yeah.
times any of us wanted to say something and you go, yeah, I better not say that. And I'm going to think about that before. And you're glad you did because
Well,
later on,
yeah. I mean, and so many of these younger people, and I hate to say it that way, but it's the dopamine hit. They need to have those likes and replies and comments, and some things just, it's reasonable and common sense. If you can say it's common sense, it's okay. It won't hurt anybody. But yeah, there's so much. I think it's so much better to be a lurker in a lot of places than it is to be a joining in the conversation.
I am very glad that when I was a kid, we did not have social media. With
Oh
all
yeah, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm so glad in the '80s we didn't record the stuff we did.
I am too. No, I am too. I think most people my age, I'm a Gen Xer too, and I think we're all pretty happy to hear that because I
Yeah.
don't think, yeah, I don't want everything I know video. I mean, it'd be bad enough if you had a embarrassing photo or something. That was like, that they had Polaroids then. Polaroids
Yes.
were a thing for a while, and to have those and look at those and go, okay, this is embarrassing. And as a teen, I just can't imagine how anxiety producing it must be for certain generations because they live their lives online. I just would be, I wouldn't be able, but we advise them in these things and think about this and you know, it, that generation of people I advise, I do notice they're like, no, no, they really want to say something. They really have to. They really want it to be, they really want to be online. And
Right.
I don't
It's
know.
almost their identity. They
It is.
don't have an identity that's not online.
They do, and they don't have a social life, and they don't understand that, and it's to them, it's more important than having healthcare and education. Sometimes it seems, and it's
Right.
not, but it's and again, part of it's a generational thing and how it's evolved, and a lot of these kids have brand. A lot of these kids, people that have kids, they're adult, a lot of them are adults, have side hustles, their jobs, their professional presence and things like that. Most lawyers that I know well, they have some, they're posting articles and things, but they're not posting everything they do online. They understand
No.
privacy, and they know that that's one of the few. Doctors are another one, they're not posting too much. Regardless, because they know those are professions where they're very confidential and very private.
Right.
With a lot of them, it's their job to get out and promo.
Yeah. And when you help, so when you're helping clients do branding, obviously, you can't take things down if you think it's litigation. But so in your media law and that sort of thing, do you advise what types of things to do for branding? So like we were talking before the call that one of the things in my marketing program is I ask my clients to do an intro video, very simple. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I can help you. Simple, right? And it's something that a lot of people find difficult talking to your phone, right? Or talking to a camera. What kind of things would you advise if we were doing branding for, say, any particular type of business that we'd be aware of not doing?
I think making any controversial political comments.
Ah,
I
yes.
I think making off-color jokes, making regional jokes that I think in this day and age, we get a lot of business from other regions and areas. And I think making off-color jokes that are, may sound funny or cool at the time. It's a lot of those same things. The common sense may sound like a good idea, but it may be there later. How often have we heard the
Yeah.
video resurfaced or something like that, or I saw this person, you know, I think if you keep it very, this is what this is what we're doing, this is the point. Some of our clients are talking about hot button topics. That's what they're
Yeah.
there to do. I mean, some of the
Rage baiting is what we call it.
yeah, but they're shock jocks. I mean, a lot of them
Yeah.
are. They want to do those kind of things. I think you need to. I had always advise if there's a client doing it, I advise them, look, you need to be careful. There are cases like Alex Jones and all these other things where people really are getting sued, and you need to understand that. And I probably would not ambush your guest, whoever you're talking about, several different reasons, because they may find a lawyer who will sue. I mean, for a
Yeah.
while, as if someone, there's the very classic retaliatory one-star review because they're mad and they want to get you, and so you see a lot of those. And unfortunately, most people those posts and people are happy with your work. But there was a wave of law. There were a lot of waves of lawsuits about people suing for that because it does damage your reputation, and the people know that. But I think people have sort of evolved past that, so they realize there could be any number of reasons. I mean, if the only rating they have is a 1 star, that's a problem. But it's people have to sort of use common sense. I also advise them that maybe you should sort of talk to the person you're talking to if you're doing an interview, something like this beforehand, and sort of get this idea and talk to them about, you know, if they're comfortable with it, if there's the area. It depends if you want to stay on good terms with them. Most people do. Most people
Yeah.
people to come back or to be willing to cooperate, and then you say, "Oh God." I mean, I've had a couple podcasts where I'm like, "Okay, this is not what we talked about." Like they wanted to talk like about lightning rod political issues and what I felt about them,
Oh,
and I was like, okay. And I think one of them was when Roe versus Wade was overturned, and all this kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, that's not why we were here. I'm not discussing thoughts are on that. But I do think you need to prep them and say, look, think about this. And, at the time, because some people they have to say it. I found most people are sensitive to their brand, and they'll say,
yeah.
if you put it to them in a context of this is your professional reputation. Once you listen, it's hard to get back. Do you really want to get the reputation as doing something like that? And, what on the whole does that do to your brand? Because if
That's
people
true.
aren't endorsing or supporting your brand, they're going to go somewhere else. You don't
Yeah.
need, there's always going to be people who don't like them. I had one client who called me and he was just in tears because he's an influencer and he's doing a good job and he's gaining popularity. And he was so upset. And I said, you got to hate her. He was so upset about it, but he'd lost perspective and he thought about it and like, you're right. I do have a hater. I do,
Yeah.
there's going to be
Well,
those.
that's kind of you knew you made it. You made it if you got someone that's trying to drag you down. That's kind of I think that's offline and online. That's the way it's always been, right?
That's exactly what it is. I said, you got to hate it. You're doing well because they wouldn't be after you if you weren't. And he got that. I think and it was true. But I also think you have to think about reputational damage and what you
Mhm.
could be doing because that's the problem you often see in anything in politics. You see it. They just keep going and they don't hit the stop button, and say wait. They don't course correct. They just keep doing it. And after a while, you're like, yeah, you've already got that reputation and
Yeah.
you can get it online.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe that's something that should be kept private,
Yeah.
and you have to think of it as a whole. And again, I think the immediacy of social media, it's the same adage. Sometimes people will say things to you and you're not ever going to look at them the same way. You're never going to be okay with that. And I think you have to say, look, if you do these things, you have to consider this. And I think with the culture and with the immediacy, people don't think about it. And
Yeah.
they need to because it really is the same old adage, common sense applied in a different context. That's really what it is. And I think it
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier to understand, when you're in an event or a party, do you really want to make those comments? If you thought about what you're going to say. And, sometimes some forethought can really help
Mhm.
you. It can really help you with doing those things. And I think that if you think if you tell clients that, and then but you need to think about reputation. Of lawyers are limited in certain states what they can say online, and so
Okay.
you really have to be careful about that. New York, for example, you can't do pretty much anything is considered an advertise, whereas in California and other states, um, some of the lawyers, and I'm not intended to disparage anyone, they're kind of more like used car ads. Come on down, it's kind of the come on down to the lot and we'll show you what's here. And then
Yeah.
we had one of the, I think it was 70s called Pussy Cal. He was a Southern California regional car salesman. And everybody knew who Cal was, and
Yes. Yes. The tall guy. Did he wear a cowboy hat or
yep,
something?
yep. And he had a
Yep.
big hats and all the see, yeah, see he branding,
Yep.
early
Yeah.
branding. And so everybody knew who he was. So he was very clear about his image and how he did this and all this kinds of things. And but you have to think about it in the long term how this works and you know what you want to say. And I think thinking ahead of that time, but you have to be thinking about yeah, even if you're not thinking about your brand, say your brand is your business and what your reputation is. Not really necessary to discuss that here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, again, common sense, is it just use some common sense about the whole thing.
it is, and
Yeah.
don't get pulled into the frenzy. And you can pivot, or
Mhm.
if you're asked a question, say, I consider that private. It's okay to say, I sort of consider that private. What my political beliefs are, and there's a way to say that if there's certain topics. And when we prep people for interview, we discuss we work with clients before they get interviewed for magazines and before they go on TV and before they go on podcasts and before they do their promoting a movie or a TV series. And we talk to them about what you're going to see, whatever project they're working on, they have things they're going to discuss. But if it goes off topic, what are you going to discuss? And some of them, they are useful. They'll say, before you talk to them, these are some things we want to put in the agreement not to discuss with them.
Right.
Because
And then prepping your client to know how to pivot away from that and not look like a jerk.
yeah, exactly. And you can say,
Yeah.
look, that's an unfortunate situation. Understand that's ongoing, continuing. There's a way to say that so you don't get into these things like, how do you feel about Army Hammer? How do you feel about the Menendez brothers? What do you,
Mm.
who do you think, how do you think such and such did in the election polls? Those things that people are not going to want to talk about.
Right.
If you're noticing some of the artists are, for example, and other people are high profile are taking sides in some of these things, and they may want to do that, but maybe your show isn't the place to do that, or don't put them in that kind of situation. Certainly not if you want them back, and
Yeah.
certainly not if you want to. And what I do also tell them is, whoever's interviewing you has a vested interest, unless they're just trying to do an expose, because if they know they put you through that, other people aren't going to want to come. Yeah,
That's right.
they're not going to want to do that.
Wow. This has been really, really interesting. I've enjoyed having this conversation. I know our listeners may want to reach out to you. Is there a better place where they can reach you and connect with you?
Sure. My email is Hillary at Hillary Trial Lawyers, and Hillary with 2 L's. And you can also take a look at our website, which is Hillary Trial Lawyers. And we're in California and New York, and we also handle matters in DC and Montana. So we're happy to hear from you and be of any assistance we can. And Marilyn, I really had a nice time this morning. Thank you, and happy Halloween to you.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed having this conversation about AI as well as social media. This is very timely, I believe. So, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do 2 things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, you can connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take the next step with a digital strategist to help you grow your law firm, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to lawmarketingzone.com to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, thanks for listening to Leadership in Law Podcast, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Leadership in Law Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of law firm owners out there facing similar challenges and striving for the same success. Head over to our website at lawmarketingzone.com. From there, connect with other listeners, access valuable resources, and stay up to date on the latest episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep leading with vision and keep growing your firm.